Shock Talk, the future of local government.
Welcome to Shock Talk, the future of local government. I'm your host, Sheila Shockey, founder and CEO of Shockey Consulting, and I'm a futurist. And what we're going to talk about today is the future of leadership in local government and how leadership is shaping the cities of tomorrow. And with me, I have a guest that is uniquely qualified to talk about our topic today, curiosity. Molly Saunders, organizational performance leader at Shockey Consulting, is the most curious person that I know, which I love about her. And what's great is that she not only has a master's in public administration, has worked many years in different roles of local government, but she also is a licensed therapist. And so she understands people, the mind, and why we act the way that we do for success or failure. So today we're going to talk about curiosity as a leadership strength and process. And thank you for joining us, Molly. Yeah, it's so great to see you. Our first question really is, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, most people talk about curiosity kills the cat. And I know you have a few cats, and they're very curious when they get on Zoom, and they love to hear male voices.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
I'm curious of why.
Why is that? It's so crazy. But in the leadership area or arena, really the person that first got me thinking about curiosity as a leadership practice was Stephen Covey. And we have this as one of our ground rules for all of our meetings, which is seek first to understand and then be understood. So can you expand on that a little bit and talk to me about why that's such an important leadership skill?
One of the most important things about being a leader is being interested in people. And so that's the foundation of what curiosity is. You have to demonstrate interest in what other people are interested in. And so as a leader, you cultivate your relationships, and really leadership is about relationships. You can be incredibly competent, but if people don't feel like you're interested in them or care, you're not going to get the results that you want. Seeking first to understand is really to understand what perspectives are other people bringing, because we all bring unique things to the table. And sometimes the I've never thought of that is the best idea.
And I think one of the things in our polarized world today is we really, and our brains tend to try to group people into specific groups so that we already know what they're going to say, or we know what their perspective is. But tell me a little bit about how we can break out of that thought process by being more curious.
Okay. I think when we divide into different groups, we often do that kind of as a way to protect what we already think. And the opposite group then becomes a bit of a threat, because what is their way overrides mine. And that becomes the focus, instead of what is it that creates those beliefs, or what are the circumstances that have led them to believe this. And I can still disagree. And I think that's where curiosity comes into play, because curiosity isn't about being right or wrong. It's about getting all the information and understanding it and even appreciating it. And then you can still draw your own conclusion. But I think in the fear of, if I talk to someone who has a differing point of view, is that threatening my own set of beliefs?
Sure.
So I think here is to look at it as, I'm not engaging to necessarily change my mind. I am engaging to really try to see it from another person's perspective. Sometimes it'll make sense. You may still disagree, but at least I can see how you got to that point, and then that takes away some of the defensiveness.
Yeah, and as a leader in an organization, oftentimes people are looking to you to say, this is how it is, and this is what we're doing. And so that can be challenging to take a step back. What are some of the barriers in terms of leaders starting to talk in more of a question format than a directive format?
I think that for leaders, it can freak people out a little bit, because the leader is supposed to have the answer and the direction. And so I think a leader needs to bring stability and some predictability, but understand that new ideas and different ideas are open, not like, I don't really, whatever you all think, maybe that's a little too open-ended, but this is what we want to achieve. Come up with 5 different ways to do it, and we'll come up with a solution from there rather than having the answer of the how to, but directionally saying this is what we want to accomplish, and then let other people bring the how we're going to do it to the table.
Yeah, and I think the transition probably from a kind of a directive culture for the top down to being more collaborative and bottom up is a struggle for not just the leader, but for the others who are used to the directive and maybe they don't trust. So how do you build trust to really create that environment?
One of the things is to let people fail. Not big failures.
Yeah, I hate that. Yeah, that's hard.
But to let people fail at a small level and learn from it and create the learning culture of, okay, that didn't work. What else could we try? What went wrong? Rather than having a punishing culture. Because I think a lot of times subordinate staff don't like being told what to do, but then when they're told do what you want and then told it's wrong, that erodes trust. And so if you're a leader and you're going to empower people to be curious and do things differently, you have to also be understanding and tolerant of things that don't work.
And that's probably pretty difficult in government. What's your experience with the tolerance level of kind of innovation, risk-taking in government, and how do you apply curiosity, and I'm spelling that with at the end, a C-I-T-Y, curiosity. How do you bring that culture to local government?
It is hard because 99 things can go right in government and one goes wrong, and that's the one that you hear about. So it is risky. I think one of the ways to do it is starting by doing things that are internal to your culture as an organization. Get comfortable with being innovative, and then you can build some confidence in that before trying big things as a community. Also, in cities, bringing people along for the ride, that's what community engagement is really about. I think many leaders could make decisions on their own in a room without feedback. They may not be as good, but bringing other people into the process and sharing information with the public and getting feedback, because maybe someone has a great idea that no one's thought of, and make that not only an internal culture, but maybe a community culture as well. We've seen cities that involve people in things that they don't have to, but it brings them along. And I think the community then has greater tolerance for things that may not work out as perfectly as expected.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even some cities I've seen, they do a good job of talking about innovation in their media releases. And they're like, we're going to test this out, or we're going to do a pilot, and we're going to explore this opportunity to learn more and to do better. And if you start with that idea from the beginning, that makes it a lot easier to build that risk tolerance within your elected officials and your community.
And I think that positioning it as this is a test. We don't know how this is going to work. For these reasons, it makes sense. And then we see if it does, but it's not launching a whole program, something large, and then finding out it doesn't work. People usually don't have tolerance for that.
That's great. So also I think about the person within the culture that may be an employee that doesn't really share that curiosity idea, or they're not really into that. How do you help people be more curious and more comfortable with that idea?
I think the biggest thing that you can do is create methods where people are somewhat forced to be curious. Come to the next meeting with 3 ideas on how to do this, and encourage people. The whole brainstorming idea of get everything out of your mind, and then we can organize it later. Sometimes people are more comfortable, especially with a manager or supervisor. They want to come with the answer and to be more open to getting feedback.
So we have a guest that's curious here. My dog just joined us, Bodie. And one of the things that I was thinking about was brainstorming. So I remember one time facilitating a group of public works officials, and we were talking about, let's just brainstorm some ideas. Let's be out there and be creative and think about ideas. And I said, there's no bad ideas. And of course, we had one guy go, there's always bad ideas. And they're right. Some of the ideas we're not going to do that, right? That's outlandish. It's crazy. But it may spur somebody else's thought. So what is your experience with kind of facilitating a curiosity session?
That you bring that up. I've facilitated sessions where people don't want to write anything on the board because they want it to be correct. And so in facilitating a session, encouraging writing as much down as possible, rewarding the more, the better. And then you can always organize later. Something else that is interesting is having different groups work and have the same parameters and see what different groups come up with when given the same set of directions.
Go ahead and say that again.
Okay. When working with groups, to generate some curiosity and interest is give everybody the same set of directions of kind of an ambiguous task and see what different groups come up with, and then have the group share and ask questions about how did you come up with this idea, or wow, we all thought alike. I think people are sometimes scared to be creative because what if theirs isn't in alignment with everyone else? And sometimes that's the point.
Yeah.
We want to think different.
They want to get the answer. It's a product of our schooling over the years is there's one right answer. And I used to argue with my teachers that there wasn't just one right answer, which got me in a lot of trouble. Sometimes curiosity can get you in trouble, Molly, but it can be rewarded later on in life, which is great, right? So now I'm thinking about put your therapist hat on, and you're trying to work with a group of people who maybe just are uncomfortable with each other. How do you help them to be more comfortable with each other and understand each other's perspective better?
Yeah, and that can be really hard because when a group is uncomfortable, it's hard to even know why. And when groups are having difficulty really opening up to each other, giving them a common task to work on together that's very low stakes, so that they can become at ease and start to become familiar with each other and build trust. Because the trust piece is where I think when people don't feel like they're with people they can trust, they're not going to be vulnerable and share different ideas or to be the outlier. Doing things that can develop relationships and have, again, low stakes to accomplish a task together is one way to do it. Another is to do things that are safe activities to share a little bit about each other, so that when people have difficulty, we often focus on the process, but you can't solve people problems with the process.
Right.
And coming up with ways to develop interaction and build trust. People don't actually have to like each other. I think that's a fallacy of we're not trying to get everybody to like each other. We're trying to get people to be able to work together. And by understanding different perspectives, encouraging people to ask questions and maybe learn how to ask a question, not like, why do you believe that? What led you to decide to do this? And really listening to understand versus just waiting for the response to tell them that they're wrong, and doing different activities that encourage dialogue versus judgment.
I like what you said about starting with something that is maybe not as complicated or high stakes. Just one example of one that I participated in that didn't go really well that I was a participant in was we didn't have a lot of food. Our leadership team was stranded on a desert island. We had all of these challenges and we had to look at each other and make the decision, I think we're going to have to kill the public works director. That didn't build a lot of trust and camaraderie. Coming up with almost easy wins that you can learn and practice this curiosity And then in relationship building is, I think, important as a first step. Don't come out of the gate with some really hard problem and you want your leadership team to sit down and ask each other questions, because there's already a lot of emotions involved in some of these more difficult challenges.
Yeah.
What else would you like to share with us about, I'm just curious, what else would you like to share with us about the whole idea of building curiosity in your organization?
When I think about curiosity, it is about making yourself uncomfortable and getting people to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and it's all going to be okay. I think just doing exercises instead of doing something exactly the same as you've always done it. An exercise that we did, instead of putting together a presentation, we had to draw our slides.
Oh, yeah.
That made me think in a completely different way of how can I present information that makes sense without using words. And coming up with different methods for people to share and interact, even making people sit in different places, shaking things up to build new relationships can be really important.
And how do you use this idea with governing bodies? I know you do a lot of retreats and team building with governing body members who maybe don't know how to ask questions, and they make more speeches than they do asking questions. So how do you work with them to build that as their basic practice as an elected official?
A lot of times in workshops, we do a lot of small group work, because when people are sitting in their decision-making stance, it's not dialogue. And so creating activities where people can work together and developing questions for them to ask. They can ask questions, but sometimes giving them prompts that help them ask questions in the right way. And again,
Get them started. Yeah.
Get them started. And sometimes it's getting them started with something that has nothing to do with the subject at hand. It's the asking 3 questions to the person next to you to get to know them better. What was your first question? Just something that can help you understand who they are. And then if you learn that they did the 5 a.m. newspaper delivery as a kid and worked really hard, they may still bring that to the table.
Sure.
In their work.
Yeah. So it's something you can relate to, but also get a better perspective of why they think the way that they do. Oftentimes, I think just the way that elected officials are set up in their decision-making process, with staff sitting separate, the elected officials up on a dais, they're not looking at each other, they're speaking to the audience, can really make for just the setup of the room could make such a big difference on asking questions or making speeches. And I love the idea of thinking about how to have them practice that maybe in a more informal environment so that they can take that to the formal part of the process a little bit better. And I think most of them are good at asking staff members questions, but not each other. Tell me a little bit more about that. I've never heard that at a elected official ask another elected official. Tell me a little bit more about that idea. And I think that's where they could do more of that, and then the community would understand better about why they're making the decisions the way they are. Because it sometimes can seem like they're just making a decision in a vacuum because they don't know all the backstory or the discussions that have happened.
Right. So one of the things with decision making, and I think it relates to curiosity, because everybody comes with a way they approach solving a problem. So I might come to a problem with wanting to know the data and what are the outcomes and show me the chart. And someone else may come to the decision
Molly.
to hear, how will this affect someone? Who will be impacted the most? What is the worst case scenario for any person? And both of those are valid. And I think if you come at it with a curious perspective, you're less annoyed that someone else wants to know about different elements of the solution. And so being curious about how other people think and approach problems can really be helpful, because if I know I'm the data person, I should probably go to Sheila and run things by to be like, how does this play with someone who is more sensitive to how it affects individual people?
Right. So you need all those perspectives to come to the best decision possible.
Mhm.
Molly, thank you so much. I was so curious about this curiosity leadership approach, and I enjoyed talking with you about it. I think you gave some really great examples of how folks can implement this. Start small, start slow, bring it into your culture, whether you're an elected body or an organization, and you'll make better decisions because of your curiosity. So remember to subscribe to Shock Talk Future of Local Government. And for more insightful discussions on trends that impact our community, check out our newsletter and our website. And thanks for listening. And let's continue to plan, engage, and inspire together.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Shock Talk Future of Local Government. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to our podcast for more expert advice. To stay up to date with Shocky and get all the behind-the-scenes content, you can follow us on Instagram at Hey Shocky.